This episode will include themes of domestic abuse, domestic violence, and sexual violence. If you need any support or advice, please contact the National Domestic Abuse Helpline on 0808 2000 247, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And welcome back to part 2 of Why We Don't Just Leave with the amazing Claire Throssell. In the previous episode, we heard from Claire, her experiences, and we ended with Claire talking to us about what prompted her to leave her abusive relationship. This episode continues straight from where we left off.
Hello, you've titled this yourself, Why Didn't You Just Leave? So let's ask the question, why didn't you just leave?
Yeah, for me, and I'm sure you'll agree, I always say to people, when they say to me, why didn't you just leave? I'll say to them, close your eyes, think about your house and everything you've paid and worked to put into it, everything that the children have in that house. Now open your eyes and imagine walking away from it with nothing. We can't just leave because it's this horrible onion that we have of layers. And the first layer is the economic abuse because there's no power balance. And that was made even clearer in my case because when we first got married, what's mine is yours sounds very caring, very sharing. But then when I stopped working full time and stopped earning as much as him, when I was at home with the boys, which I don't regret for a minute, and then started working part time, it became a weapon. Well, you can't have that coffee in that coffee shop with your friends because you don't earn the same money anymore. I'm not going to buy that top, but I'll buy that top because it costs different. All the things that was equal becomes unequal and becomes a weapon. He weaponized the fact that I was at home with the boys. He weaponized the fact I took a conscious step back from a potential career, to spend more time with the children, to be there at the school gates, to drop them off, to be there when they come home, to provide that stability that was the only stability they had in life. And then look at how I could have actually got money and means separate to actually be financially independent. I couldn't because he knew exactly how much I earned. And if I started squirreling money away in a separate account, he would know that this amount of money is missing. So the questions would start, where's that money gone? And if it was every month, he'd start saying, what are you spending it on? Show me what you're spending it on. He went onto online banking, took all passcodes off me. So I had no idea how to get into the account. But more importantly, he had an alert on his phone every time money was spent or money went out of the account. So again, it was another weapon. It was another form of tracking. It's a form of stalking because he knew where I was, what I was spending, what I was doing. And if I'd have said to my mum, can you put some money aside for me? That's not financially viable either because she didn't have the money to do that. So the reason why we can't just leave, the reason why we can't just go is because we're trapped. In some cases, it might be a gilded cage with lots of diamonds and lots of money, but it's still a cage. And let's flip it the other way. I was lucky. I had my mum that lived a mile down the road. But how many victims are out there that have been moved away from the family, moved away from the friends, and there's nowhere to go other than a refuge? There'll be no childcare options. There'll be no possibility of becoming independent financially. And also, you've then got the responsibility alone of feeding clothing and maintaining a lifestyle for your children. I'd have broken Jack and Paul's hearts if they couldn't have run, if they couldn't have played the trumpet. That costs money.
Yeah.
Where was I going to get this money from? And the
But
bank,
that entrapment, isn't it? I think that's you know, like you're saying with I always love the onion analogy that you use, but I think each one of those, like you said, economic abuse being the first, it's like a layer of entrapment, and then you start to see all the others. And I think that is really powerful in showing, because again, people often are judgmental about what they might perceive to be a lifestyle choice, whereas what you have said so very clearly is for the boys that those things gave them life, it gave them hope, it gave them escapism, it gave them somewhere to channel all of their emotions. And so actually that's not like a nice to have, that's like a need, but not a need that people would kind of consciously think about when they're talking about what do children need, because people are thinking about, oh, a loving home and some food and some warmth. But actually when your loving home is being attacked by one part of that home, you do need those other things. You do need the way to channel it. And I think survivors are often judged for those choices, but it is that entrapment that they take you from where you are. It's like, I call it resource stripping. They strip you of all of your resources, and then they entrap you, and then you can't see how you can ever get those resources back again, whether it's your sense of self, but also the real practicalities. I think that's such an important point about why.
Yeah, and at band, it was like a different family that embraced Jack and enriched his life. He had two fantastic role models in his trumpet teachers and the band leader. They were men that showed him how men should be. He didn't have an example at home, and my dad had died. They were there, and they were a constant in Jack's life. And at running, Paul had got his release there. And it was their safe spaces, because home, apart from me, wasn't a safe space. And it hurts even now to say that. But my home was not a safe space for my children or me. So when you look at it from the financial point and from people that don't have understanding family that live nearby, and my mum understood, but there'll be some families that say, you're not being abused, don't be stupid, you can't leave, what are you doing, don't disrupt this perfect marriage, this perfect man, this perfect family. And they're also isolated. The one thing that I wasn't was my mum would never let me be isolated from her. And he hated her for it. But she made sure that she was always in touch with me. We went out, we had a bond. But he could have easily separated us, because I'd get punished every time I saw my mum or took the boys out for the day. The boys learnt not to say what they'd done all day. I didn't ask them to lie. I just told them not to say that we'd been out, because they knew that the house would change. So I wasn't asking them to lie. I was just asking them not to elaborate on what had happened in the day, in the summer holidays or wherever, if we'd gone out.
The safety planning, that's what you're doing. And that's one of the key things. If we go back to like the protective things that survivors do for their children, that is it. That is the safety planning, because you don't always want to be firefighting and being like in the moment, because that's when we know that things are super dangerous. You want to be, how can we prevent abuse from occurring? And that's what survivors sadly become so good at. But it's the work that survivors do that people don't see and people don't value. They don't value that every single day safety planning that survivors do in order to prevent abuse from occurring. And it's really undervalued, particularly when we get to talk about, you know, like social care assessments or family courts. They're never seeing the protective thing. What they're seeing is there's these incidents of abuse that have occurred, and and you didn't protect your children, this whole failure to protect, and not recognise that every single day there is work to protect. And I think that adds to those layers of not feeling able to leave is exhaustion. because you're doing everything and then you're exhausted by the abuse and by all the extra labour of trying to keep, you know, your children safe and yourself safe.
I think that somebody that isn't educated about domestic abuse, somebody saying, well, why don't you just leave? That's simplistic. What we're discussing here is it's not so simple, that it takes resource, it takes planning. Sometimes it takes weeks, months, even years to get to that point where you can safely leave. And there still needs to be some education around that particular, well, why don't you just leave? Like, well, it's not easy. And you highlighting that, Claire, from your own experiences is extremely important and powerful, of going, that's not helpful for people to say that to somebody like me. Somebody's in this situation, it's not helpful. It might be well-meaning, but it's not actually helpful. And all it does is it adds more layer of shame, frustration, guilt.
That onion has suddenly more skins and more layers, because we're already emotional, we're already on the edge, we're already had our confidence and self-esteem stripped away. And then for people just to say that but not help, it's like, don't say that, because it's just not possible. I was in a situation, he got out all the banking online. I didn't have the passcodes. If I wanted to buy anything, Mum would give me the money, and then I would withdraw the money at some point, make up an excuse of how I spent that money, and give Mum the money back. I absolutely didn't want him to know where I was 24 hours a day and having to justify being there. And it was hell. The crisis point came. I went to see a solicitor, and their advice was, well, he'll have access to the children, you'll not get a mortgage because you won't be earning enough money, and all your assets will have to be shared half. So in one consultation, everything had just been confirmed and knocked down to the floor. It confirmed all the worst fears. He'd have unsupervised contact with the children, which they would hate, and it wouldn't be safe. I'd only have enough money of half of the property to sell it, and I probably wouldn't get a mortgage to get a new property, to build a new house, a new home, a new family with my children. So what do? You stay. And I did what I could. I used my body as a shield. As I said, 3 times the doctors had reports of injuries consistent with domestic abuse, no questions asked. I gave them my mind, I gave them my heart, I gave them my soul. But the crunch moment came when, at the top of the stairs, he'd been going on and on and on at Jack about his homework. And it's that chit, 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 that dominating personality that he will break his son, he will break his mental will and his emotional well-being. If you don't get your homework sorted, you'll never achieve in life. And he just turned around and he said, I've done it. And the next news was, I saw this fist coming towards Jack, and it was level with his face. So without thinking, I shoved him into his bedroom, shut the door, and I took the punch on my arm, but the force was that hard, spun me around at the top of the stairs, and I bounced down every step to the bottom. Paul heard it. He was in the living room. He came racing through to the hallway. Jack came clattering down the stairs, and they were distraught. They just threw themselves on me, which didn't help because Jack was like 12 at this time, and I could feel every bone in my body had been jarred. But he stood at the top of the stairs and he said, look what you made me do. And I thought, no, I didn't ask you to go towards your son and punch him. I didn't ask to be punched on my arm, and I didn't ask to be thrown down the stairs. And that's when I knew, because Jack and Paul just looked at him and said, we don't like you. You've hurt Mum. And he said, you've turned them against me. Look what you've done. He said it twice. And I'm like, no, I didn't ask you to do that. But I also knew that I couldn't let the boys see that anymore. And I couldn't take it anymore. So we'd been locked in before. He'd locked me in the house a few times as a control thing. And I said to Jack, get the car keys, get the spare set of keys, go to the car, set the car running, take Paul with you. He knew how to start a car, but I knew that this was the one opportunity to get away, because he was at the top of the stairs and he'd have to get past me to get to the boys to lock me in. So I somehow got up off the floor and every breath hurt, got into the car and went straight to my mum's. But immediately he was on the attack. I'm going to have the boys on my day off. And I'm like, they don't want that. Well, I'm seeing them, I'm having them. And right from that starting point, it was attack mode.
And I guess from that moment onwards where he's now attacking, so he's gone, is because he knew that he had lost that control in that moment and that it was now going to go into a place that he did not have any control over. So what's the first thing that you do is I'm going to attack before getting attacked.
Yeah. So I left this 3-bedroomed house that I'd spent hours renovating and making really nice, making into a home. Everybody thought it was beautiful and, you know, it looked lovely. I walked away from that and I took my boys with me. We had no money. We had no car because it was a joint car and he could get it back whenever he wanted. And we went to my mum's. They went in my old bedroom and I was in the spare room, wedged in with everything that mum normally stores in the spare room. I'm just grateful that she opened her arms, opened her heart, and allowed us to move into a safe space, a safe haven. And I was really lucky because I don't know of a refuge around me. I wouldn't have been able to go to my sister's. My other sister had cancer, terminal cancer, so she was fighting her own battles, which I kept mine away from her. And it was like, people said, "You've what? You've left?" I was like, yeah. But I didn't tell them that I'd been thrown downstairs. I didn't tell them that the boys had said that they didn't like him and he accused me of turning the boys against him. And for those 6 months, it was tough. It was hard. He immediately barricaded the property and made sure I couldn't get back in. The boys had no possessions. I had to buy all new school uniforms, new shoes, the lot. We literally walked out and he put bike locks and padlocks across the house, put barriers everywhere. I couldn't get back in. But then you've got even more barriers to face. You're already feeling, I'm going to swear here, you're already feeling like a piece of shit. You've already had a load of shit just piled. You've left, you're scared, you're getting harassed from the other half. Then you go to the council and you say to them, I've just left an abusive relationship, I've got 2 children, can I go on the council house list? And was told, no, you've made yourself deliberately homeless, you're on a mortgage, no, you can't have a council property. And that was in a public space, in a public area. Then I had the fight with the bank to set up a new account and have my money paid into a new account. And all these are, I call it secondary abuse, abuse by proxy. They are adding to the abuse that you're suffering right then. I shouldn't have had to explain to the council. And I remember walking out that building with tears just streaming down my face thinking, what do I do? What do I do now? Everything is set up for you to fail when you leave.
Yeah. Can I ask, Claire? I was going to ask, I get what always maybe intrigues me, it's not the right word, but we'll go with that, is that when you went to that solicitor was obviously telling you factual stuff of what their experience tells them would happen in this kind of situation. But had they said, to you in a different way, had they said to you, look, this is going to be incredibly tough, the likelihood is that it will be 50-50, he will still have contact with the children, but I'd like to support you through that? Or had you gone to housing and say, look, at the moment, it doesn't look like you are, although you were eligible for homelessness, but even if it doesn't look like, but we're going to investigate, are you safe now, staying at your mum's, but we will look into this further and we'll come back to you. Would that have, I know it wouldn't necessarily have changed the facts of the situation, but would that have given you some confidence to, like go forward earlier, to feel like you had like people around you? So even if the advice is the same, what I'm always really keen to encourage people to do is just say, be realistic about this is the facts of the situation, this is the reality, but this is what we can do, or this is what we will do, and then you've got some informed choice, but either us or someone else will walk alongside you in that process. Because I think through these conversations, what would be great, I think, is at the end of each conversation, we start to give some people like real small tips, whether you're a member of public, whether you're going through it now or you're professional listening, to say just change your language a little, then it does create that confidence. I guess that's what I'm interested. Do you think it would have made a difference if someone was kind of kinder in their realism?
Yeah, if they treated me like a real person and said, look, it's going to be hard, but we're going to hold your hand, we're going to help you and guide you through, then that would have given it a whole new perspective. To just be told a no in a public space when you didn't deliberately make your children homeless, we were in danger, but to be told that in such a cold way was not helpful. And like you say, if they'd have just said, yep, we'll look into it and we'll see what we can do, however you are at your mum's, so you'd be a low priority, even if they'd have said that, even if they'd have took me into another room out of the public area, given me a tissue even, when I just dissolved in front of them, because it's humiliating. I was also angry because they'd accused me of deliberately making my children homeless when I had a mortgage. I was like, that's what's trapped me, and you've just confirmed why I was trapped. If they'd have made it easier, and if the bank could have said, oh, let's make it easy for you to separate your finances, even work, I had to fill a form in to explain why I wanted my wages moved into another bank. Imagine how I felt sat writing a letter telling my employer that I'd let this happen to me and I needed help. I shouldn't have had to explain why I wanted my money into another account. I shouldn't have had to say anything really to the bank regarding the finances, but all these secondary abusers adding layers to this onion that's getting thicker and thicker and smelling really, really pungent now is just building. And this is why it's never easy to leave. And this is why organisations such as IDAS, Women's Aid, can cut through all this and give practical advice.
And I think just a couple of things, but I think that is a good point to kind of end on, really, is actually what was being said earlier about that call to action is the importance of agencies being mindful, showing some compassion, even if they don't understand domestic abuse and the nuances behind that, just showing a bit of compassion to somebody that is saying that this is happening. You as the expert, you as the banker or the housing officer, okay, domestic abuse isn't your job, but just having a basic understanding, a basic human compassion, not doing something so public. And I think that that's kind of a really good call to action to kind of end the episode on, really, especially on this first one, because you named it. This is why we don't leave. This is why it takes a long time. The second thing is, how long were you together?
We were married 16 years, engaged a year 17, together a year 18 years.
So just on that, 18 years, right from the day dot when he's pursuing you, this isn't something that is quick or easy or fast. This is 18 years of a life of behaviors that are being broken down, that are being manipulated, that you have got used to. And so it is not quick and it is not easy. So saying things like, well, why don't you just leave, when you've got 18 years of a home and finance and bills and all of the stuff, the schools, everything surrounding this 18-year marriage and children, it goes to show that it takes time. And then when you finally get to that 18th year, and something where you have done your motherly instinct of getting in between that fist, I would rather get the hit than my child. You protected your child, and in that moment, like you made that decision to finally leave. All agencies just need to be a little bit more compassionate when somebody is saying, this is happening to me.
Yeah, and a little bit of empathy, like we've been saying throughout. You know, quite rightly, we've said we are empathics, so we don't like to hurt people. But then when we need help, everybody's turning around and saying no, or making the situation even harder. And it doesn't have to be as hard as it is. When you're going through that, just a little action, taking me into a private room, giving me a tissue, perhaps listening, not making me write a letter to explain that I have to change a bank. Little things of support would have made a big difference. And yeah, the facts are there. And for anybody to leave, it takes courage, it takes heart, and you're scared of what's to come, not just from them, but from what you can give to your children for the future, because you want to give them the same lifestyle that they've already got. You don't want to take things away from them that they've already missing. Like, they only had half the love and security that they should have done. And I wasn't prepared to make them be deprived of the things in life that helped them be whole people, that gave them their reasons to be normal and level, to achieve at school, and to still have a childhood. I walked away from a house, status, the norm, and doing that was hard. We have no other choice, and we don't choose to make our children homeless, despite what the council said. I didn't choose to make them homeless. I chose to try and protect them and give them a childhood. But equally, if you haven't got the money, then a childhood without money is tough. At the end of the day, Jack still needed his white shirts for school. Paul needed his sweatshirts and trousers, you know. These don't grow on trees. The only person who helped actually was Universal Credit. They immediately got onto it and immediately sorted it out. And that was such a big relief.
So even in that, like, you know, somebody has recognized, hey, there's a bit of a need, and somebody has jumped on that and been able to meet that need. Just wrapping up this episode, because we've got so many more to go. Wrapping up, like, and for anybody that is listening, there, as Claire has just said, there is hope out there. Tap into what support is around you. I would really encourage you that if anything resonates with what's being discussed within this podcast, please do reach out to your local domestic abuse organisation. If you don't know who that is, just Google search where you are. There is the National Domestic Abuse Helpline that is at the beginning and the end of this podcast. So please do reach out to them. We want to give you as listeners hope. Claire, it might have taken you 18 years, but you did get out. And there is organisations that are ready and willing to help you. All you need to do is give them a call.
You've just listened to the last episode in the parts around why we don't just leave. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Next episode, we will be looking and exploring what does post-separation abuse mean. Until then, take care of yourselves and please do like, share and follow us so you don't miss out on the future episodes.